Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up, the WNW 165 for Friday, November 7th, 2014. Well, the Republicans now control both houses, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. But here's just a little nugget to start off the newscast. You know, I read multiple papers every day, and this is what the USA Today published the day of the midterm elections. White House confident Dems will hold Senate. And Greg Hunter's confident the Easter Bunny's going to bring me carameled eggs this year. And Santa Claus is going to slide down my chimney. I mean, the mainstream media is another thing. Just a couple days before the election, I was telling, a friend of mine that, they keep telling us how close this is going to be. And you know what I think? I think that's a big lie. I think when push comes to shove, it's going to be a blowout. You watch, it's going to be a blowout. They're just saying that so they won't disenfranchise, Democratic voters. Because, mainstream media is in the tank for liberal Democrats. I'm sorry they worked in mainstream media. They are. I think it's a big lie. What happened? Blowout. It wasn't even, a lot of these races were so lopsided it wasn't even funny. And I predicted months ago that the Senate would be held by Republicans. Did I not? I said it many times. Here's another prediction I made. I'm in North Carolina, and I said Kay Hagan is going to be booted out of office. You watch, she'll be booted. And I said that, when I first said that, there wasn't even a Republican primary. She was up by 17 points against any Republican they ran against her. Tillis won, of course, and that's despite the fact that a libertarian, a third-party candidate, was on the ticket. Now, who takes, most of the votes from, Democrats or Republicans when a libertarian is on? Well, Ron Paul, libertarian, Republican. So the libertarian naturally takes more votes away from the Republican. Well, Tillis still won. He would have shellacked her if it wouldn't be for the libertarian candidate, but he won. And listen, Hagan way outspent Tillis in this Senate race. I was watching one commercial, and he comes out and says, people hate me, and they probably hate my opponent, Kay Hagan. And, this isn't about hating. This is about, my opponent voted for Obama, voted with him, and voted for his policies, including Obamacare. And, that resonated. People's premiums are going up. There was many lies. I mean, the Democrats lied as a party to get this through. They did lied. It wasn't cheaper. You couldn't keep your doctor. You can't keep your health care plan. And we don't even know what Obamacare really is because of all the exemptions and all the extensions and things that the Obama administration put off. Well, now in the Senate, you're not going to have Harry Reid, who's going to be the blocker. You're going to, I heard there was more than 300 pieces of legislation that went into Harry Reid's office as the, majority leader of the U.S. Senate and never came out. It was like the Bermuda Triangle of legislation. It went in, never came out. Nobody ever voted on it. Well, now Mitch McConnell next year is going to take, control of the Senate, and legislation is going to go from the House to the Senate and right on Barack Obama's desks. Right on his desk. And I know he's basically threatened, and the Democrats said, well, he'll just start vetoing things. Well, hold on, I have another prediction. But before I make that prediction, let me tell you what Harry Reid's chief of staff said, David Crone. Let me read this to you. It says volumes about what Democrats think. And he says, and I'm going to read it here, the president's approval rating is nearly 40%, he said, and this is out of the Washington Post. What else is there to say? He wasn't going to play well in North Carolina. Of course he didn't. Iowa and New Hampshire, all states, not all states they lost. But I'm sorry, it doesn't mean that the message was bad, but sometimes the messenger isn't good. Number one, doesn't mean the message was bad. Let me tell you the message that I've been getting, that your bankers can commit all the crime they want, that you can hang people out to dry in places like Benghazi and let them be murdered, that you can not help them and not try to, have security there when they needed it ahead of time, even though, Al-Qaeda was firmly implanted there and then come out and lie. Another big message was about thwarting First Amendment activities by using the IRS. Not a smidgen of evidence there. Really? Not a smidgen. Fast and Furious with gun running and Eric Holder. Spying on all of America. Spying on reporters. And the list, the Veterans Administration letting these guys die while they're waiting for care. Meanwhile, the top people are getting bonuses. I don't know. The list goes on. You mean that message? You mean the message was good? And this line here, but sometimes the messenger isn't good. Oh, what a diss to the president, to the leader of the party. This is the chief of staff for Harry Reid, so you know they've been talking about this. Sometimes the messenger isn't good. So the president isn't a very good messenger. Let me tell you what that says. You talk about throwing somebody under the bus. Well, Reid's chief of staff, he didn't get fired. You hear him get disciplined over that? No. He was a quote in a major newspaper, major news organization. Sometimes the messenger isn't good. So here's my prediction. They're going to put bills through the Senate. And if you think that the Democrats didn't throw the president under the bus this time, wait until 2016. They're going to throw him under the bus. They're going to back over him. They're going to throw him down off a cliff. They're going to throw him down the stairs. Oh, man. They are going to line up with some of this legislation that will help the country and make them look good. And they're going to say, oh, listen, I voted for America and I voted against Barack Obama. Can you hear the campaign slogans now? I voted against the president on the pipeline, on the Keystone Pipeline. I voted against the president. I stood up to Barack Obama. Democrats are going to be saying this. In the Senate and the House, particularly in the Senate, a lot on the line. A third of the Senate is up for re-election, and in 2000, every 2 years, and in 2016, can you imagine the Democrats that will vote with Republicans at least on some legislation, so they can say, "I voted against President Obama." Oh, and just think about this. This wasn't just some nibnob, in some small congressional district. This was the chief of staff of the Senate Majority Leader saying, sometimes the messenger isn't very good. Woo, what a slap in the face. Oh, man. And that's what I think will win. Okay, now, what I think that will happen. Now, all that said, hey, listen, the country's in deep financial trouble. And there isn't anybody on either side of the aisle, Democrat or Republican, that has a clue on how to fix what's going on. We have a growing, nearly $18 trillion deficit. We have nearly 93 million people no longer in the workforce. We have around 47 million people on food stamps. Can you imagine what the breadlines would look like if we didn't have a food stamp program? Meanwhile, we have China running around the world, opening up all these trade facilities with yuan and euros and ruble and rupee and all these Asian trade facilities. Now they have a yuan trade facility opened up in Great Britain and Canada. If that doesn't spell doom for the U.S. dollar, at least some severe, heavy headwinds, and I know the dollar's been rising as of late, but if that doesn't spell big trouble for the U.S. dollar, I don't know what does. We can't keep growing the deficit at a tune of $1 trillion or $2 or $5. John Williams says we're really going on the hook for $6 or $7 trillion in the last year. We can't do that. That's not going to work out. At what point does it tip over? And they're not going to come out and sound a trumpet and warn everybody to, hey, you need to leave the market. Hey, you need to have some, hey, the whole thing's going to melt. They're not going to do that. I'm telling you, we're going to have one of these Sunday nights before Barack Obama leaves office. He's going to come on the air, and he's going to come up from his office and say, tomorrow the banks aren't going to open, but it's not that bad. Who knows? But this is totally uncharted territory for any country ever to have this much debt, this much currency printed, this many bonds out, this, hundreds of trillions of dollars in derivatives. The global debt picture, not just the U.S., but the global debt picture is up by at least 40%. It was 70 trillion the last time it blew up. It's $100 trillion now. Not a clue in Washington how to really fix this. Really. And I think they're going to be, fighting over the Mad Magazine and deck chairs on the Titanic, after we hit the iceberg. Both parties. Next story, the president revealed that he has secretly written a letter and maybe letters to the Ayatollah of Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini, and he's trying to get the Iranians to help with the fight in the Islamic State. Now, these are Shia, and the Islamic State and the people we've been trying to use to knock off Assad are all Sunni. And they hate each other like the Hatfields and McCoys, the Shia and the Sunni. And now the president is secretly writing letters to the top guy in Iran. Isn't Iran on the State Department state sponsorship of terror list? Isn't Iran on that list? Aren't we trying to get Iran to curtail its nuclear program with these negotiations? It's P+5. The U.S., the Great Britain, Germany, France, us. I mean, isn't that what we're trying to do? Aren't we trying to get them to curtail their nuclear program? The other thing is our ally, Saudi Arabia, who also armed these rebels in Syria, which were al-Qaeda linked, which, ISIS, the Islamic State, broke off from and now has their own state. At the very least, the U.S. helped arm. Now, they're reported in the Washington Post in September of 2013 that the CIA was arming these rebels that were in part al-Qaeda. We, at the very least, helped arm the Islamic State along with some of our allies like Saudi Arabia. Can you imagine what Saudi Arabia is thinking? One of their arch enemies, the Obama administration's writing a secret letter to, hey, would you help us kill all these Sunni Muslim Islamic State people? Excuse me? And Israel, who says that Iran is the big problem in the world, and the Obama administration stopped Israel from bombing Iran a year or so ago. That means that Israel thinks they can do it. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying they think they can do it. They stopped that. So, and now the Sunni Muslims, the rebels that we want to arm, we just, voted to fund these moderate rebels, and they're supposed to knock off Assad. Well, Iran is backing Assad and backing Hezbollah and propping them up along with Russia. And now what? A nonsensical, crazyville. What is the policy? It's so discombobulated and so disjointed and so wackadoodle, I wouldn't waste a single American life over there until somebody has a coherent plan as to what exactly they want to do and what they want to accomplish and how they're going to do it. Because what we have over there now is a collage of chaos. Speaking of chaos, financial war is raging between the West and Russia. Europe, the U.S. Have sanctions against Russia. Russia has countered against the U.S. and the European Union. The European Union is in a triple-dip recession. They do not want to have these sanctions. It's hurting them. Now we find out from the Department of Homeland Security that allegedly, that the Russians have unleashed a security threat, cybersecurity threat, a bug, a Trojan horse called black energy, quote unquote, black energy, and it can do things like shut down power plants. I'm not surprised we're committing financial war against Russia. Their ruble is in the tank. There's inflation over there. We're trying to make it as hard as we can on Russia. Saudi Arabia is pumping crazy amounts of oil, although they recently have curtailed some of the pumping. Some say that they're trying to, hurt Russia. They're trying to hurt oil prices. Russia gets a lot of their revenue from oil, and if they crash the price, they can crash the Russian economy. As Jim Rickards came on here and said, hey, Russia, you're having a financial war. They're not going to take that. So I'm not surprised if it's true that Russia is counterattacking us and Europe and cyber threats and whatever. I mean, what do you expect? Also, Vladimir Putin was out recently and, with very harsh words for the West. And I want to give you a quote on this. He said that America was creating, quote, an empire of chaos. Putin's telling America, we, the United States, is creating an empire of chaos. Well, I don't want to carry Vladimir Putin's water, but what we're doing in the Middle East, and now we're trying to get Iran. We need you to kill these people. I know we armed them, but now we want you to kill them. Oh, and you guys up there in Syria, you're Sunni, and yeah, we don't want to tell you about Iran, but we want you to kill Assad. I know Iran is backing Assad. What could go wrong? Gold and silver prices are being pounded into the dirt. I mean, you got silver in the $15 range. We have gold in the $11.50 type range. And demand is skyrocketing. I mean, they ran out of silver eagles at the U.S. Mint. That's a fact. I checked it. Ran out temporarily of silver eagles at the U.S. Mint. Meanwhile, the price is crashing. Gold sales also very strong. And, of course, China and Russia and the BRICS and other countries imported, tons of gold into. They continue to do so. But at the Mint, very strong sales for U.S. Eagles, and they plumb ran out of silver Eagles. So gold Eagles, very strong sales. Silver Eagles, poof, be gone. It's over. They don't have any more. They say they're going to run some more, but they're sold out. So with demand at hugely high levels, the price is going down. There is no other explanation other than criminal manipulation for that. You don't have, a massively rising demand and crashing prices. You just don't. I'm sorry, you don't. And so, and of course, that goes on completely unchecked by the regulators in the U.S. But what do you expect? Here is the latest little disaster here with JPMorgan. JPMorgan investigation, another investigation, this time into criminal charges for foreign exchanges. This is yet another added to the list of the many civil and criminal investigations. Of course, not a single big banker has ever gone to jail over any of this, but there may be some hope. And I want to just hold this up to you here. This is a Matt Taibbi story in Rolling Stone magazine. This is a different, unrelated story, and it's the $9 billion witness. Meet J.P. Morgan's worst nightmare. And it's a former attorney with J.P. Morgan, a high-ranking attorney with J.P. Morgan that says, hey, she was going to testify in all these cases they settled. They spent billions of dollars settling cases, so, she doesn't get to testify. And now the tide may be turning once again. She says, hey, listen, she has evidence that, according to the story, Matt Taibbi's story, she says that she has evidence that they knew they were committing criminal activity and they were doing fraud. They knew it, and she can prove it. And she can prove top bankers at J.P. Morgan knew they were committing criminal activity, banking fraud, crimes, what have you. I am oversimplifying, and that's not an exact quote from this story, but I'm oversimplifying. But on top of that, the Taibbi story says that not only that, but some of the worst financial crimes in history have been covered up, not only just by the bankers, but by Attorney General Eric Holder. Are you getting that? Some of the biggest financial crimes in history are being covered up by our government and the top law enforcement cop, the Attorney General of the United States. That's the accusation that Taibbi's story makes, that Holder knew about it and helped the banks cover up criminal activity, so big criminal activity, so nobody would ever know about it. This is the same Eric Holder who at one point said, well, we couldn't prosecute the bankers because it could implode the system. At another point, he said, oh, no bank is too big to jail. And most recently, he said, well, corporations are so big that, corporations can just commit crime. This is an exact quote. This is the idea that corporations can commit crime and that the people working in the corporation may not know it. Oh, so the corporations can commit crime, but the people running the corporation, they don't know that the crime's being committed. Right. Don't hold your breath for any criminal charges, let alone criminal convictions of big bankers. And finally, the last thing I want to give you is the Ebola update. New York is now actively monitoring more than 300 people. This is all because of the doctor that was treating people in West Africa and came home. And, of course, he made it through the screening process. Lovely the way that worked. He came down with Ebola. But before he did, he rode on the subway, went bowling, went out to eat. But now they're monitoring in New York, just from one guy, 350 people. They're monitoring. Now, listen, there's been a lot of folks, and some people have even written me about this, saying, this Ebola thing's a hoax. that this whole thing is a government's black ops operation, that there's a the CDC has a patent on this Ebola, and that that there's some evil things going down. And you know what? I will say, I don't know if that's true or not, but I will say this: how they're handling it on both sides of the ocean. I mean, remember we were told that our soldiers, they wouldn't be in contact with Ebola. It's just going to go over there to kind of help. Oh, yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And we brought people over to treat people here. We were told that, oh, nobody's going to have Ebola over here. Wrong. And so the way they're handling this on both sides of the ocean, why are they still stamping passports and issuing visas? Why don't they say, let's put this on hold for a month or 2 or 3. Let's just hold off here. And then they have this ridiculous screening process that doesn't really catch people who are not symptomatic. And then they allow people to go all over the country. And that just, we'll make sure if you get a temperature, call somebody. I mean, really? What could go wrong with that? The long and short of it is, I have not heard a coherent reason by any official that thinks that not having a quarantine, I haven't heard a single official say why not having a quarantine is a good idea. And a single official. In other words, they say, oh, no, we can't have quarantine. I haven't heard a single reason why a quarantine isn't a good idea. Not a coherent one. Thank you very much for supporting USAWatchdog.com. That's the way I see it. Also, thank you for your donations. We really appreciate it. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter, and remember, this is my favorite part. Fear not.